For the third presidential election campaign in a row, the United States is bearing the brunt of targeted foreign influence to cause chaos. From phishing emails to websites masquerading as news outlets to attempted hackings, influence from overseas parties is becoming the norm. While Russia continues to be seen as a major foreign actor engaging in this type of operation, it is the emergence of Iran which has increased its efforts to influence the 2024 presidential election. Joining me now to discuss this is Alireza Jafarzadeh, Deputy Director of the National Council of Residents of Iran. Alireza, thank you so much for your time today. Now, I want to kickstart right into the Microsoft. It released its report last week that showed that the company had been tracking activity that pointed to Iran's intent to influence November 5 election. Can you walk me through exactly what Microsoft found?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your show. Definitely, I mean, the Microsoft study basically shows that the Iran regime has been trying to hack into the internet, and they have access to the data here in the United States related to the elections, and trying to find information that could be useful or detrimental, but also have a way of access to a way to damage this. And this is not the first time that either Microsoft or others have talked about the Iran regime's hacking operations. Remember that the Revolutionary Guards, the IRGC, they have what they call the cyber army. And this is part and parcel of their overall strategy. It shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. They have a whole garrison known as Ammar Garrison in Tehran, dedicated solely to their cyber army. They engage in cyber operations to damage different agencies and different systems in the Western nations. They use the same system to target their own opposition, their own people inside the country by using spywares or trying to identify the dissidents and try to go and arrest them. A good number of those arrests have been already made during the protests, have come as a result of the same cyber army of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. So you should see that as part and parcel of their overall strategy of terrorism outside of Iran and repression inside the country.
And this particular report from Microsoft, it said that it found that a compromised email account was trying to gain access to the system of a high-ranking official of a presidential campaign. Alireza, do you know if there's any word on who this official was and what party it was a part of?
Well, it's not very clear. Obviously, there are specific references to the Trump campaign, but also I know there's investigation to see what other campaigns they have been trying to have access to. That kind of information is very valuable to the Iranian regime because they feel they're vulnerable. The regime is desperate, and they want to find ways of find out about where things are going, and second, how they can actually influence it, how they can neutralize the pressure from the outside. The regime wants to not pay any price for their rogue behavior, whether it's their terrorism, their involvement in the region, or suppression inside the country. So that kind of an information would be, to say the least, very valuable to the Ayatollahs and their overall strategy.
But Alireza, what is the driving force behind this desperation? Because we're starting to see Iran, drive up their attempts to influence the United States' election on November 5th, and they're becoming on par with the Kremlin, with Russia's attempts to do that. They've been attempting for years to influence the US election. So I wonder why now is Iran got this desperation to influence the US election as well?
Well, the timing is so important because the regime feels, just 2 months ago, they lost their president, Ebrahim Raisi, who was a big help to the Supreme Leader Khamenei. And the demise of Raisi has been a major blow to the Iranian regime. The new administration that they're trying to install is no match. They're facing a lot of opposition. inside the country. The main concern that the regime has is that what if the outside pressure would couple with the internal protests and dissent against the regime? That would be a deadly mix. Remember back in January 2020, the terror master Qasem Soleimani was taken out by the Trump administration at the time. There was maximum pressure policy trying to impose sanctions to dry up the resources to the Iranian regime. These are very detrimental to the existence of the regime. And so the regime is concerned about the prospect of ratcheting up pressure on them, imposing more sanctions, reaching out to the Iranian opposition, those forces for change, especially at the time that they're so vulnerable inside the country. That explains as a driving force behind their cyber operations, trying to influence the outcome of the either the elections or just at least have some misinformation fed into the system, so this way they can neutralize any future pressure on the Iranian regime.
Yeah. Well, days after that Microsoft report was released last week, Politico revealed that it had been emailed documents from within the Trump campaign, to which Donald Trump's team then said that some of its internal communications had been leaked. Now, there's no word if this hacking was coming from Iran. The FBI is still investigating, but how likely do you think that it is Iran that is behind this hacking and these documents sent to Politico?
Well, definitely there's a very serious investigation. As you mentioned, the FBI is on top of it. And I wouldn't be surprised if they find out even more details about this involvement. I don't have any separate direct information, but I think what the report suggests now, as far as we know so far, it actually corroborates with the overall strategy of the Iran regime. It corroborates with the agenda that they have regarding the elections here. They want to see, who is at the end of the day going to be in the White House, and one of the two choices, if they come, what is the Iran regime going to do to push back against them or take advantage of the circumstances? So the Iran regime, more than any other time in the past, is watching the situation here in Washington, is watching the outcome of the elections, because Tehran has never been so vulnerable, so weak inside the country. The concern that they have with their own population, with the uprisings and the prospect for change has never been so great. And the main concern is that, the revival of the uprisings in Iran. And what if that would, be coupled with the pressure coming from Washington?
So, Alireza, is it safe to say that it's in Iran's best interests for Kamala Harris to be sworn into the office over Donald Trump?
Well, obviously, I mean, you don't need to be an expert to see that, lifting sanctions on the Iran regime has been basically helping them, because it releases funds for them to fund their proxies, and not enforcing the already existing sanctions on Iran. All of those things are basically recognizing the legitimacy of the regime. It's to the benefit of the Ayatollahs, so long as that policy of appeasement continues, so long as the Iranian regime gets benefits as a result of their hostage taking. Why would they abandon it? Why would they expect a different strategy? Remember, unfortunately, the terrorism and hostage taking of the Iran regime have turned into a very, very profitable business for Tehran. They get cash in return for hostages they take. They get their criminals released by the hostages they take. They use the nuclear threat as a means to gain concessions from the outside world. Remember, this time 22 years ago, we exposed all the major nuclear sites of Iran, particularly the nuclear site in Natanz, which is the uranium enrichment. Until then, there were no inspections by the United Nations nuclear watchdog known as the IAEA. And it was right after our revelation that the IAEA inspections started and led to 6 UN Security Council resolutions. But what has the world actually done at the end of the day? The world has basically fallen into the trap of appeasement with Tehran. They have allowed the nuclear weapons program to flourish. And now they are enriching uranium way beyond 60%. They're just a screwdriver's turn away from getting enough fissile material for 2-3 bombs at least. They have advanced their weaponization part of the program, their delivery system. All of these things need to stop. And so it makes a difference for Tehran. What would the outside world do?
Yeah. Well, Alireza, in one of his parting presidential decisions, you could say Donald Trump in January 2020, not only a few weeks away from he was about to hand over leadership to Joe Biden, he sent off that assassination order to Iranian commander Qasem Soleimani, as you mentioned before. Do you think that Iran is still wanting payback for that? Because we know that only a few months ago or so, right around the time that there was that assassination attempt against Donald Trump, that US intelligence reports were suggesting that Iran was planning a plotted kill against Donald Trump himself. Is this all an act of retaliation against the former president?
Well, the Iran regime's officials, from supreme leader to all the other commanders of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, have been very open and publicly have said that they will take revenge and target the president of the United States. They mentioned him by name. The website of the supreme leader Khamenei showed, Mr. Trump on the golf course and, with the word revenge. But, it's one thing. So the agenda of Tehran is known. But the other side is their capabilities, the situation inside the country. The elimination of Qasem Soleimani has been a major blow to the system. The regime has never been able to recover from the loss of Soleimani. His replacement, Qa'ani, is no match for him. Soleimani was actually the number 2 person in the regime. You have seen a lot of the decay and infighting happening within the regime. They can't even put together a cabinet now with the new president. So these are all incapabilities of the Iran regime. But on the other side, Tehran's agenda has always been relying on terrorism outside of Iran and suppression inside the country. So no one should be surprised to see Tehran trying to do these things. But the only way you can actually confront the Iranian regime is actually firmness and decisiveness. The Iran regime only understands the language of decisiveness. That's the only way they talk. So what you do in the face of these threats, you ratchet up pressure, you impose more sanctions, more pressure, you hold them accountable for their crimes, because the Iran regime, remember, they haven't paid the price for all the crimes they have committed, whether outside of Iran or inside the country. And terrorism remains to be the most profitable business for the Ayatollahs. That needs to change if we want to see an end to the terrorism. And honestly speaking, that prospect will never happen until we have change in Iran. Imagine a free, democratic, non-nuclear republic, Iran. What a difference it would make, not just for the people of Iran, but for the whole region. How it would basically dry out the main source of terrorism. Remember, the head of the snake of war and terror lies in Tehran. And that the head of that snake will never be crushed unless the mullahs are overthrown. And that's what's been happening inside the country by the people of Iran. And the world has to stand with them.
Just a final question, Alireza. How much of a threat do you think Iran is becoming? Because if you're an average consumer of the news, you would say that Iran is pulling the strings in every aggression coming from the Middle East, besides Israel, but towards Israel. And now we have these cyber attacks, threatening to hang over the head and influence the US presidential election. It just seems that Iran is now the axis of evil. They're the puppeteer in all things coming from that area of the world. So how much of a threat is Iran at this current stage?
Well, there is a reason that the Iran regime has been designated for over 3 decades as the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism, and things have actually gotten worse. They're developing a very sophisticated nuclear weapons program. They have their drone program. they're killing their own population. But what is really missing in the midst of all of these things is to look at inside the Iranian regime, how rotten this regime is to the core, how the people of Iran, 85 million population of Iran, a vast majority of them are opposed to this regime, not just by boycotting massively the sham elections, which they just did last month, but by actively opposing the regime in over 9 rounds of major uprisings since 2018, engulfing over 280 cities, large and small, in all 31 provinces of Iran. So when you look at Iran, you look at the whole thing. You look at the regime as the big threat, but also you look at the people of Iran, the organized resistance as the biggest ally the outside world has. This is a movement, the Iran resistance has a platform for the future of Iran that is based on, the vote of the population, based on separation of church and state, gender equality, religious tolerance, peace in the Middle East, a free market economy, and a non-nuclear Iran. That's it's not just an ideal, it's happening on the ground. And there's tremendous support built internationally for this movement. And I think that's something we need to focus, whether it's in the United States or Europe, focus on the allies, the capital, the prospect for change in Iran.
Alireza, Jafarzadeh, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to be on your show. Appreciate that.